Hi, today we are talking about Dolby Atmos with John Escobar from Berklee University and Matteo Marciano, if I said that right, Matteo, you'll correct
That's
me,
right.
from the NYU University. We'll talk about object-based audio, tips and tricks about object-based audio, Dolby Atmos in general, and of course about the minimal requirements to run a studio, a project studio, or at home. So hello and welcome to both of you.
Hi there. Thanks for having us.
Thanks so much for the invitation.
You're very welcome. So is immersive more than surround, Matteo?
It really is. If you think about how technology has progressed through, especially, in sound for film, and right now we're actually seeing this huge debut into sounds for consumer in headphones right now. It is something new. We started to move from channel-based systems where you were a little bit limited. And again, I want to make a little bit of a differences between consumer versus pro systems. Imagine if you were to mix either a soundtrack or a song in a small dub stage, a 7.1 or a 5.1, which was the standard. So back then, and still nowadays, since 5.1 and 7.1 are still very, very well used, the problem was how would you move audio and how accurate your mix would have been after you move from a smaller scale dub stage into a movie theater per se. So if you think about moving objects and moving sounds actually from a channel-based point from speaker to speaker, the thing that I think was the big of a challenge was how well that panning movement would translate on a larger scale system. Due to the fact that right now we move from being channel-based to object-based, first and foremost, it makes possible for us to mix things in a completely different perspective. Whereas mixing for film has always been very allocentric. That means that you had the movie and you were mixing in reference to something which happens on the screen. Right now, having the audio, in my perspective, being immersive makes things a little bit more egocentric. Think about application for VR, or think about right now all this music application that are figuring out ways to make this egocentric position of you being at the center of a almost 360 degrees platform allow you, the listeners, to enjoy music and sounds in a completely different ways, and allow also us that work within the sounds to be a little bit more creative. We don't have to be forced to, figure it out how to position sounds and make the sounds to come through, just a stereo sets of speakers or just a surround, but we can actually pick and choose where we want the sounds to be. The great thing is how Atmos made possible to translate into different systems. So how easy it is to downsize from a 9.1.6 to a 5.1 to a stereo, and actually how to decode that into binaural for headphones related applications. So I think in a way, immersive, it's doing what Blu-ray did for visual content. If you think about nowadays, everyone, unless they see every single small details of somebody's characters during a film or a television show, that look on their TV is not good enough. So it's kind of like the industry has educated people to work and to want a little bit better image. And of course, for sounds, it's taking a little longer because we have been constrained to work for a long time, and we still are to work with, streaming services, which are a great asset in terms of discovering and listening to music, not such a great asset in terms of listening to music.
Yeah,
and
but
in a way,
there's been a lot of improvements, right?
absolutely,
So we can
absolutely.
talk about Tidal and Apple Music now. They both supporting Dolby Atmos, right?
And that's the great thing. That's exactly where I was going. Right now, I think it's the industry is kind of re-educating people to enjoy really music and to listen to music, not hear it music and have it as a background color within what happens within their day, but actually turning on a little bit more their listening and focus cues, due to the fact that Atmos allow you to really bring out more texture within what we're working on. So it's not anymore how we can mix fit everything within a mix, but how can make this mix immersive from the listener point of view and have people kind of like having a journey within whatever they're listening to.
Beautiful, beautiful. So the basis from, I'm trying to go like maybe a little bit too far into the history, but anyway, so Dolby Atmos or ambisonics or 5.1 or whatever, it always comes down to localization and specialization of sound, right? So when we're talking about 5.1 system or whatever, you, as you said, egocentric person, right? In the middle of everything, you're basically localizing sound based on your hearing system, right? But when it comes to downsizing or down mixing to binaural or something like that, and you're actually hearing things around you in a 3D space, that's specialization, right? So artificially made positions, right? So maybe John, you can shed some light on this when it comes to Dolby Atmos and object-based versus binaural recordings or ambisonics recordings, which we also talked about in the early OLLO Chat episodes, right? So I think that's two different approaches, and I believe that many are still a little bit confused on where something ends and the new thing starts.
Yeah, so I think, it's kind of, I often think about even just mixing in general as having two sort of discrete approaches to it. You can either recreate or create a mix, right? So you're either recreating the exact moment and space and time where a musical performance took place, or you're taking the pop approach and you're overdubbing everything and then creating a world that didn't necessarily exist physically at the moment that the performance was captured. And so I think binaural and Dolby Atmos downmixing versus capturing ambisonics is kind of that same idea. When you're capturing ambisonics, you're using a microphone, a tetrahedral microphone array, to essentially capture the actual acoustics and the physicality and all of the directions of whatever is currently happening at that moment in time in the performance. And the great thing about that is that you not only in capturing those directions, you're already inherently dealing with the phase correlations of the objects. You're dealing with the phasing alignment of all of the reflective surfaces around you. So it's all sort of baked into the capture that you make. Perhaps the downside of that, which we now have a little bit more control of in Dolby Atmos, is that using the Dolby Atmos renderer in binaural mode, I've got the plugin that allows me to actually object by object and or stem by stem decide how much or how little binauralized spatialization I want to add, right? So I've got these three modes. I can four modes. I can turn it off. I can go close, near, and far. And that's basically just saying from a centered egocentric position, where do I want my object or stem to play back at me in terms of how much reflection point, how far away, distance-wise, how far away do I want that to be? So it's a great versatility that I'm getting. And perhaps the downside of that I could see is that you're essentially always creating kind of two mixes, right? So you're, on the one hand, you're creating an Atmos 7.1.2 bed plus objects on top of it. And that is your Atmos file that is intended to scale up and down to however many speakers your consumer is going to be dealing with. And then at the same time, you're also effectively recreating that same mix to be able to play back in a headphone environment over binaural stereo audio. And you really have to be paying attention to make sure that both versions of your mix are actually translating the same way. So there's there's more room for error if you're not careful, I would say. But certainly much more room for creativity.
Thank you. But isn't there like a moment in a project when you would need to decide what format are you going to use, right? We're talking about immersiveness in both cases, right? So what are like 1 or 2 points that you need to consider before you make a decision? Okay, this project will be a Dolby Atmos project, this project will be a ambisonics project. What are the core maybe differences or limitations that you need to be aware when you're making a decision to maybe even which studio you're going to go with?
Is this a question for who?
Let's make it you, Matteo, right?
Okay, so I mean, at least from my point of view, there are 2 considerations that generally I make and that I'm forced to do. The first consideration is thinking where a lot of the platforms in the industry are going. If you think about Netflix and you think about Amazon, they're all moving to an Atmos-based format. So whether we want it or not, we could always run into the problem if we just finalize a mix in 7.1 to upscale or upmix whatever it is that we did in Atmos. So in my experience, I think, and I found in myself, that if I know that in a way Atmos is actually, I don't want to say it's becoming the actual standard for creating content, but it's starting to acquire certain importance within the industry. Due to the fact that down mixing from Atmos to more 5.1 surround, I think it translates much better than simply doing an up mix. In many cases, whenever I have the chance, I would prefer to mix things in Atmos and then always have a 5.1 mix that I would recreate afterwards. And especially I'm mixing lately a couple features, some documentaries, which are required some Atmos mixing. There are small facilities that don't necessarily need to be a big Atmos dub stage, which will allow you to actually work. If you think about it, how everything has developed within the past few years, where right now with a production toolkit with the Atmos, you are capable, if you have enough power and speakers within your home studio, to recreate an Atmos system and start working in Atmos from your home. And then again, you can always bring whatever you have done to a larger scale theater if that Atmos system, if that mix actually requires a larger scale mix.
Yeah, but you're touching here on a very important thing, especially from our point of view, right? So
Right.
we are making headphones, right? So where in this scenario, the headphones, where is its place? Where do they belong? In what way can you utilize the power of headphones, a binaural scenario, in monitoring for immersiveness?
So I think
Maybe
that's
John.
I think that's where Matteo's absolutely right, and that where Dolby Atmos is becoming sort of the quasi standard, and it's because it does enable you to not only recreate a speaker setting, and we've got the curves available to do so, but it allows you to start a mix, a Dolby Atmos mix in headphones, and then come into a room like the one I'm in and check it in a full speaker system. And in fact, a lot of times, I actually prefer to do it that way around anyway, sort of to start in headphones, because the reality is that most of my consumers, I assume, are going to be in some form of headphone based system, on a phone, on a whatever. And so I want to make sure that my mix, first and foremost, actually translates to that format. And then I upscale or I check it in a speaker system. So I think that's maybe one of the reasons that Dolby is becoming such a predominant player in the market, because it's kind of like it's the same approach as the VR headsets, right? As soon as we untethered ourselves from a computer and we were able to even do, mobile in our pocket phone VR systems, now more of the market is it's accessible to more of the market. So I think it's an accessibility factor, and everybody on the planet has a set of headphones, right? Maybe not everybody has a great set of headphones, but everybody has a set of headphones. And I was reading a article which was talking about how 70% of our worldwide population has some kind of a smartphone device that will effectively be able to stream one of the services that is now delivering Dolby Atmos. So I think it's really, that's what's pushing the quest for, how do I start it, and from a content creator perspective and also a consumer perspective.
Beautiful. So maybe just a small touch on the target curves. So when it comes to Dolby, fair and square, I'm just starting to understand it a little bit more. I'm a newbie in this, but when it comes to Dolby, I've seen that they have preferred target curves for studios, right? And they have free theatrical and home entertainment and also the music one. The idea is, when you're mixing, you try to make things fairly balanced, and you try to spot problems, and usually you have stereo image, right, to worry about, and you position instruments there, right? So now when you scale that out to 360 sound, right, that's another mixing parameter that you have to deal with, right? So I'm now wondering, in the stage or in the traditional way of mixing, having a nice speakers and a balanced sounding room with X reflections and this and that target curve is important to deliver a mix that translates, right? So how does what role does that still play in a Dolby Atmos, for example, mixing session?
I mean, I still think that it plays a major role having a properly treated room. That's why, you can't just simply have a Dolby Atmos room. Dolby needs to come and certify that room somehow. That needs to have specific specs within how big is the room, the number of speakers do you have installed within the rooms, and if whatever you're going to be doing is for theatrical or home release. What I found it myself noticing while mixing in Atmos is that Atmos, it's incredibly adaptive in terms of format. It actually reproduce and translate much better than when mixing only on channel-based system. For instance, if I would mix in a room that is much smaller in an Atmos system, I know for a fact that due to the fact that the Atmos renderer will do an analysis of how many speakers and sound and point sources there are in different other rooms, I can absolutely make sure that whatever decision I will be taking within my mix is going to be absolutely perfect due to the fact that the renderer, the RMU and larger theaters plays the roles of analyzing where the metadata bounced into the master final track and can output exactly audio in the exact same way it was mixed. Now, it does plays a major role the way your room is configured, especially because right now we are introducing another sets of loudspeakers. We have the overheads, which started to be incredibly interesting because right now you can actually play in an open space with the concept of height. So I could actually move my source and moving it from being just simply beds into object, and I can decide what to do within this object. And what I found in myself extremely intrigued is how capable you are to still work with object with the immersive stereo, which Dolby Atmos allows you to do, the AC4 IMS, I believe it's called. And this allows you to pretty much to retranslate into headphones objects positions by using 4 primarily cues: the off, the near, the mid, and the far, which allows you to position audio within your speakers that doesn't come straight from a source, but again, it takes care of a little bit more the binaural aspect of how you are supposed to perceive sounds within a specific space, if you may.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So when it comes to, I'll just jump to a question that we got from our community. It's probably something that you guys get asked a lot. So if the majority of the music listeners will be enjoying Atmos with headphones, will maybe producers, engineers not be too concerned with other formats going forward? So I guess this is from FD Mastering. Is Dolby going to be the de facto format for music, John?
That's an interesting question. I think we're certainly sort of seeing it going that direction right now. I don't think we're gonna ever end up with one end all be all format. We still mix in mono sometimes. We still mix in quad sometimes. And even delivery platforms, we're still making LPs and cassettes. They're out there. So I think it's going to be a major player in the market. I think it's a huge opportunity in terms of remixing of older catalog for major labels. There's a lot of that kind of work already going on, and it's an enormous opportunity for new projects to sort of showcase themselves in a way that they're not necessarily able to right now. For instance, I'm working on a Latin jazz record, and from the very early on, we sort of decided that this was going to be a Dolby Atmos project for the simple reason that if you look at Apple Music Dolby Atmos catalog right now, there really isn't that much there in that sort of category. So you're kind of putting yourself as a front runner in a world that's sort of still being created. So I think there's just a lot of opportunities in that sense for sure.
Beautiful. So second one would be from Frederick Gazem. To get a taste of Dolby Atmos power, what's the minimal setup you would recommend?
I would say to go with the bare minimum, which is a 7.1.2, which give you 2 channels of overhead, although 7.1.4 would at least allow you to have a very small overhead array. And that would be a setup that I am planning to kind of get for my home studio. So that could be a good starting setup for Atmos.
Beautiful. All right. So we are a little bit running out of time. We have like roughly 2 more minutes. So Matteo and John, you're both university professors, right? And both very prestigious, Berklee and NYU. So is there any rivalry between you guys?
Not that I know of. We're very friendly with everybody. And if anything, I think the exciting thing right now, especially with a new format like Atmos, like immersive sound in general, there's such a wealth of information sharing that's going all over the place, and in fact, my hope is actually that the more that colleges and universities like ours that have sort of that prestige, as you put it, the more that we make this available and talk about this, the more we actually centralize the information. Because I know that for me, sometimes just going out and figuring out where to look for the correct information or reliable information is a bit of a challenge. So I don't see a rivalry. I think it's a friendly opportunity.
Absolutely. I mean, the collaboration, I think it's key. Something that I think we should teach our students, and something that I've experienced in my life working in the entertainment industry, is that collaboration is the only key to actually move forward and to succeed within a project. So I think we got to a point where the more we could figure out ways to create interdisciplinarities between what we do, even between university, between programs, between students, between faculty, it's just going to be a phenomenal medium to all figure it out, new ways of moving towards these exciting times for audio, which is the immersiveness that is it allowing to do. I remember that there were times where within the music industry, everything started to slow down to the point that everyone was wondering, okay, what's next? And I remember when it was 7 years ago or a little bit more, when I was at the Audio Engineering Society convention in New York City, there were a couple of booths of researchers talking about immersive audio, and wasn't really a thing. And if you fast forward to 3 years ago, which was the last time I joined at AES prior to COVID, of course, immersive audio was the only thing that right now everyone is talking about. It's this new beast that is coming into place that would allow us actually to move forward from an old concept of content creation and to create something new, really allow for a lot of experimentation in it.
Beautiful. So to sum it up, it's a massive opportunity for everyone involved. From artists to producers, engineers, and hey, yeah, even manufacturers of gear.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. So thank you both, John and Matteo. This was a pleasure and an honor to have you guys, talking and taking the time to talk with us and our community. And I really hope that we'll be able to do that maybe in person at some point when this COVID situation ends.
That'd be great.
Beautiful.
Yeah, thank you so much, and thanks for putting us in touch.
Absolutely. If not, this is the best thing you could have done, Rock, other than, of course, creating these marvelous headphones. But creating these sorts of connections is something that are the really meaning of, being and doing music.
Thank you. We really try with all the endorsement community, connecting this, we do a lot of projects trying to push little artists or engineers starting out. For example, there's a guy, Tim Palm in Sweden, and we strike a deal with Daniel Freire and Mike Zuniga, really strong names in Latino, and they're gonna help him, to produce a song for us, for OLLO, using spare parts of our headphones, right? So they'll make the sounds and then produce them and make something like an intro for this kind of podcasts, right? And the thing is that Tim is a guy with disabilities. He's playing things with, his face, his nose, and so on. So he's really struggling in a sense, but the mentality is there, right? He's a creator, he's making things, he's moving forward, and his goal is to, someday make a studio that is, designed for people with disabilities. And I think that's something that the community must support in whatever way, shape, and form we can. Thank you for pointing that out. The community is what we do very much. It's very strongly in embedded into OLLO, and you guys are actually making this a reality. A company from Slovenia in the middle of Europe, starting out 5 years ago, now making huge waves in the industry. That's not on us. That is on you guys, on the community, talking to each other, having no rivalry, helping out, sharing information. That is what is, all about. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
This podcast is distributed by Headliner Magazine.